The ship moved slowly through the darkness of space. It was small compared to the stars around it, just a tiny dot of metal and light traveling through the endless black. The name painted on its side read Horizon's Edge. Inside it were 12 people who carried the hopes of an entire world. Captain. Tai-Ho Park stood at the front window and watched the distant stars. He was 38 years old, young for a captain, but Earth had chosen him for a reason. He was calm. He was patient. He did not make quick decisions or lose his temper. These were the qualities humanity needed for its first real meeting with alien life. Behind him, Ambassador Neri Kwan was reading through her notes for the 100th time. She was a professor before this mission, a woman who had spent her whole life studying languages and communication. Now she would use everything she knew to speak for all of humanity. "Are you nervous?" Tai-Ho asked without turning around. Nari looked up from her tablet. "Yes, but I think that is normal." "It is," he agreed. "I am nervous too." The crew had been traveling for 7 months. They left Earth with gifts and good wishes, with music and art and seeds from every country. They carried a data crystal that held humanity's entire history. The good and the bad, the wars and the peace, the failures and the successes. Earth had decided to be completely honest. They would hide nothing from the aliens they were about to meet. This was either very brave or very stupid. Tai-Ho was not sure which. The Galactic Concord had ruled the galaxy for 40,000 years. They were a group of 17 different alien species who had joined together long ago. They controlled millions of planets and countless ships. They were powerful beyond anything humanity could imagine. When Earth first discovered their existence, there was fear. Some people wanted to hide, to turn off all signals and hope the aliens never found them. Others wanted to build weapons and prepare for war. But in the end, humanity chose a different path. They chose to reach out. They chose to say hello. Now the Horizon's Edge was approaching Station Velis, the center of Concord power. It was a massive structure floating in space, bigger than any city on Earth, covered in lights that blinked in patterns Tai-Ho did not understand. "They are hailing us," said Jisoo, the communications officer. She was young, barely 25, but she was the best at her job. "Put it through," Tai-Ho said. A voice filled the bridge. It was cold and flat, translated by computers into words they could understand. "Human vessel. You will follow the marked path. You will not deviate. You will dock at Bay 17. Representatives will meet you there." Tai-Ho nodded, even though the aliens could not see him. "Understood. We will comply." The channel closed. Nari stood up and walked to stand beside him. "Not very friendly." "We are strangers to them," Tai-Ho said. "We would be careful too." The ship followed the marked path exactly. Tai-Ho made sure of that. He did not want to give the Concord any reason to distrust them. Every move they made had to be perfect. When they docked, soldiers were waiting. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms, wearing armor that looked like it was made of black glass. They did not speak. They simply gestured for the humans to follow. Tai-Ho walked at the front with Nari beside him. The rest of the crew followed behind. They walked through long hallways filled with strange smells and stranger sounds. Other aliens stopped to watch them pass. Some looked curious. Others looked disgusted. A few looked afraid. Finally, they reached a massive door that opened into an even more massive room. This was the Grand Chamber, the place where the leaders of the Concord made their decisions. It was filled with representatives from all 17 species, sitting in chairs that floated in the air, arranged in a circle around a central platform. On a throne of pure light sat the High Arbiter. His name was Thule, and he was very old. His body was thin and pale, almost like a skeleton covered in white paper. But his eyes were sharp and cold, the eyes of someone who had seen everything and feared nothing, humans, Thal said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "You have come far." Nari stepped forward. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times. "High Arbiter, we come in peace. We bring gifts from our world and hope for friendship between our peoples." She held up the data crystal. It glowed softly in her hand. "It contains our history," she continued. "All of it. We hide nothing from you. We want you to know who we are, what we have done, and what we hope to become." Thule gestured, and one of his servants floated down to take the crystal from her hand. He examined it for a moment, then passed it to another servant who disappeared through a side door. "We will review your offering," Thule said. "You will wait. When we have decided, you will be informed." Nari bowed her head. "We understand. We are grateful for this opportunity." Thule made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Grateful? Yes. You should be grateful that we allowed you to come at all. Most new species are not so lucky." Taiho felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his face calm. This was a test. Everything here was a test. "We will wait as long as necessary," he said. "We are patient." Thel stared at him for a long moment. Those cold eyes seemed to look right through him, seeing every thought, every fear, every secret. Then the High Arbiter waved his hand. "Take them to the waiting quarters. They will stay there until we decide." The soldiers led them away. As they walked, Nari leaned close to Taiho and whispered, "Something is wrong." "Did you feel it?" "Yes," he whispered back. "But we have no choice. We must trust the process." The waiting quarters were comfortable but small. There were beds and food and water, everything they needed to survive. But there were also locks on the doors and guards outside. They were not guests. They were prisoners who had not been told they were prisoners. Days passed. Taiho tried to keep the crew calm. He organized games and exercises, conversations, and music. Nari continued her studies, learning everything she could about Concord law and custom. She made friends with some of the lower officials who came to check on them. One of them, a young translator named Kira, seemed genuinely interested in Earth and its people. But as more days passed, Taiho noticed something strange. The officials stopped coming. The guards changed more often. And sometimes, late at night, he could hear sounds from somewhere deep in the station. Sounds that might have been screaming. On the 17th day, Kira came to see Nari one last time. She looked afraid. "You need to know something," she whispered. "They are not deciding. They have already decided. They decided before you even arrived." Nari felt her blood go cold. "What do you mean?" Kira looked over her shoulder at the guards. Then she leaned very close. "They are waiting for authorization. Authorization to kill you. Authorization to kill everyone on your planet. I am sorry. I am so sorry." Then she was gone, and Nari was left standing in the cold room, her heart pounding. Knowing that everything they had hoped for was already dead, Nari did not sleep that night. She sat in her small room and stared at the wall, thinking about Kira's words. They had already decided. They decided before you even arrived. It made no sense. Earth had done nothing wrong. Humanity had never attacked anyone, never threatened anyone. They had come with open hands and honest hearts. How could the Concord condemn them without even a chance? But deep in her mind, she knew the answer. It was not about what humanity had done. It was about what humanity might do. It was about fear. She found Taiho in the common room the next morning. His face was tired, his eyes heavy. He had not slept either. "You heard something?" he said. It was not a question. The translator, Kira, Nari sat down across from him. She said, "They have already decided to destroy us. Our planet, everyone." Taiho was quiet for a long time. His hands rested on the table, perfectly still. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "Then we need to warn Earth. They control all communications. We cannot send anything without their permission. Then we find another way." But there was no other way. They were trapped in a box surrounded by soldiers, millions of light years from home, with no ship and no weapons and no friends. The only thing they could do was wait and hope that Kira was wrong. She was not wrong. On the 18th day, soldiers came. Not 2 or 3 this time, but dozens. They moved through the waiting quarters like a storm, grabbing crew members, pushing them against walls, putting restraints on their hands. Jisoo screamed. Others fought. But it was useless. The aliens were stronger and faster, and they did not care about causing pain. Taiho was the last one they took. They hit him in the face when he tried to protect Nari, and blood ran down his chin as they dragged him away. She called his name, but he could not answer. The restraints around his wrists were too tight, and his eyes were full of something she had never seen before. Not fear, not anger. Something else. Something quiet and final. They brought Nari to the grand chamber alone. The other crew members were taken somewhere else, somewhere she could not see. The floating chairs were empty now, except for a few officials who watched from the shadows. This was not a meeting. This was a judgment. Thul sat on his throne of light, looking down at her with those cold, dead eyes. "Ambassador Quan," he said, "we have reviewed your offering. We have studied your species. We have made our decision." Nari's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stand straight. "May I speak?" "You may listen." Thul raised one thin hand, and a screen appeared in the air. On it was a map of the galaxy, millions of stars arranged in spirals and clusters. A small dot near the edge started to glow red. "Your star system," Thul said. "It sits in a very unfortunate location. The rift corridor runs directly through this region. It is the fastest route between the eastern and western spiral arms. Whoever controls this corridor controls trade, military movement, and political power." Nari's throat was dry. "We did not know. We would never try to control silence." Thul's voice was like ice. "It does not matter what you would try. It matters what you could become. Your species is young, but you grow quickly. Too quickly. In 1,000 years, you might be powerful enough to challenge us. In 10,000, you might surpass us. We cannot allow this. We came in peace. We want friendship." I laughed. It was an ugly sound, like bones breaking. Friendship. Peace. These words mean nothing. The only truth in the universe is power. And we will not share power with anyone, least of all a species of clever apes who have barely learned to leave their own planet. The screen changed. Now it showed a fleet of warships, 40 of them, arranged in perfect formation. "The sterilization fleet will depart within the hour. Your homeworld will be cleansed. Your species will be erased. This is not personal, Ambassador. It is simply maintenance." Nari felt tears burning in her eyes. "You cannot do this. Your own laws say that new species deserve a trial, a defense. A chance laws are for members of the Concord. You are not members. You are pests." Thal waved his hand. "But we are not without mercy. We will show the galaxy that we do not act in secret. Your captain will be executed publicly as a symbol of Concord authority. All will see what happens to those who stand where they are not welcome." Guards dragged Tayo into the chamber. His face was bruised and his uniform was torn, but he stood as straight as he could. His eyes found Neris across the room, and he gave her a small nod. "It is okay," that nod said. "I am ready," Nari whispered. Then louder. "No, you cannot do this. He has done nothing wrong." She tried to run to him, but guards held her back. She fought and screamed, quoting Concord law, begging for mercy, offering everything she had, but no one listened. No one cared. They forced her to watch. Thul raised his hand. A weapon appeared, floating in the air, pointed directly at Taiho's heart. "Any last words, human?" Taiho looked at Thul. Then he looked at the camera that was broadcasting this moment across 1,000 star systems. His voice was steady when he spoke. "You think you are ending a threat? You think you are protecting your power? But you do not understand what you have done. My people are kind. My people are peaceful. We came to you with gifts and hope and love." He paused. Blood dripped from his lip. "But my people also remember. We remember every wound, every betrayal, every injustice. You could have had friends today. Instead, you have made enemies. And humans. We are very good at being enemies." Thul snorted. "Brave words from a dead man. Remember them," Taiho said. "Remember my face. Because when my people come for you, and they will come, you will wish you had listened." The weapon fired. Taiho Park vanished in a flash of light so bright that Nari had to close her eyes. When she opened them again, there was nothing left. Not even ash. The chamber was silent. Then Thul spoke again. "The fleet will depart now. In 3 days, the planet called Earth will no longer exist. This matter is closed. Guards took Nari away. They threw her into a small cell with no windows and no light. She lay on the cold floor and wept until she had no tears left. But even as she cried, she remembered Taiho's words. You do not understand what you have done. Somewhere far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, the broadcast arrived. 8 billion people watched their captain die. 8 billion people heard his final words, and 8 billion people went quiet, not with despair, not with surrender, with something darker, something older, something that Concord had never felt in all their 40,000 years of power. It was rage. Pure, cold, patient rage, and it was only beginning. The message reached Earth at 3 in the morning. Local time in Seoul, a young technician named Minji was the first to see it. She was alone in the monitoring station, drinking cold coffee and watching screens that usually showed nothing interesting. Then Captain Taiho's face appeared. Then his words. Then the flash of light that ended his life. Minji dropped her cup. Coffee spilled across the floor, but she did not notice. She was already running, already screaming for her supervisor, already knowing that the world was about to change forever. Within an hour, every government on Earth had seen the broadcast. Within 2 hours, the streets were filled with people, staring at screens, watching their captain die again and again. Some cried. Some prayed. Some stood in silence, their faces hard as stone, in a bunker deep beneath the mountains of Korea. General Doyeon-beek watched the broadcast for the 5th time. He was 62 years old, a soldier who had spent his entire life preparing for wars he hoped would never come. Now the biggest war of all was coming, and it was not against other humans. It was against the stars themselves. The door opened behind him. His aide, a young woman named Salman, entered with a tablet in her hands. Sir, the World Council is ready for your report. Doyen nodded. He turned off the screen, but Taiho's face remained burned in his mind. Those last words echoed in his ears. You do not understand what you have done. The council chamber was chaos. Leaders from every nation were shouting at each other, blaming each other, demanding answers that no one had. Some wanted to surrender. Some wanted to run. A few wanted to build weapons, but they laughed bitterly because what weapons could Earth possibly build that would stop an alien fleet? Doyen walked to the center of the room and raised his hand. The shouting continued. He waited. Finally, someone noticed him standing there, and slowly, the room went quiet. The fleet will arrive in 71 hours, Doyen said. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. That is the time we have. 71 hours to do what? The speaker was a politician from Europe, her face pale with fear. We have nothing. No ships, no weapons. We are insects to them, Doyen said. We are not insects. We are humans. And humans have been preparing for this day for a very long time. He touched a button on his tablet. The main screen lit up, showing a map of Earth. Red dots appeared across the continents, hidden in mountains and forests and ocean trenches. Dozens of them. Hundreds. What is this? Someone asked. Project Prometheus. Project Wrath. Project Lazarus. Doyen pointed to each cluster of dots. These are weapons, ships, defenses. They have been built in secret for 200 years, maintained by a small group of people who knew that someday humanity might face extinction. The room was silent. Then a voice from the back, that is impossible. We would have known. You did not know because you were not supposed to know. The founders understood something important. If the public knew about these weapons, other nations would want them. Wars would be fought. Secrets would be stolen. But if everyone believed we were defenseless, there would be no reason to look. Doyen walked to the edge of the platform. The Concord thinks we are primitives. They think we have nothing. They are wrong. We have ships hidden beneath the ice of Antarctica and the deserts of Africa. We have weapons that can tear through their armor like paper. We have been preparing for this moment since before your grandparents were born. How many ships? Someone asked. Enough. How powerful are the weapons? Powerful enough. The European politicians stood up. Her voice was shaking. Even if this is true, we cannot win a war against the entire galaxy. No, Doyan agreed. We cannot. But we do not need to win. We only need to survive. And after we survive, we need to make them understand something very important. What? Duan looked at Taiho's frozen face on the screen behind him. That touching humanity was the worst mistake they ever made. The next 70 hours were the busiest in human history. Across the world, hidden bases opened. Ships rose from underground hangars, their hulls black and sharp, their weapons humming with power. Soldiers who had trained for decades without ever expecting to fight found themselves standing at their posts, ready to defend their home. Doyan commanded the defense from his bunker. He had a team of the best military minds on Earth, and they worked without rest, without food, without hope of survival. They knew they might die. They accepted it. What mattered was giving humanity a chance. The civilians were not told everything. There was no time for explanations, and panic would only make things worse. But they knew something was happening. They saw the ships rising into the sky. They heard the thunder of engines. And even though they were terrified, many of them found something strange growing in their hearts. Pride, defiance, the stubborn refusal to die quietly. On the 70th hour, Doyan received a message from the orbital stations. The enemy fleet had been detected at the edge of the solar system. 40 warships, each one the size of a small city, moving toward Earth with the casual confidence of hunters approaching prey. Doyan studied the images. The ships were beautiful in a terrible way, sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that humans could not even name. Any one of them could destroy a continent. Together, they could burn the entire planet to glass. But they were also overconfident. Their formation was loose. Their weapons were not charged. They expected to find nothing but fear and silence. They would find something very different. All stations, Doyan said into his communicator. This is General Beak. The enemy is approaching. In 1 hour, they will enter weapons range. When they do, we will show them what humanity is capable of. He paused. Across the world, millions of soldiers and scientists and ordinary people listened to his voice. They killed Captain Taiho Park. They laughed when he died. They called us pests and primitives and insects. They thought they could erase us without consequence. His voice hardened. They were wrong. Today we teach the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. Today, we fight not for victory, but for vengeance. Today, we remind the stars why humans should never be underestimated. He stood up straight. Ships, prepare to engage. Let them come. Let them see what happens when you threaten our home. The fleet came closer. Earth waited in silence. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 40 alien captains joked about the easy mission ahead, completely unaware that they were flying directly into the mouth of a trap. The silence would not last much longer. The Concorde fleet dropped out of faster than light travel, just beyond the orbit of Mars. Admiral Veth, commander of the 40 warships, looked at the small blue planet on his screen and felt nothing but boredom. This was his 37th sterilization mission. He had burned countless worlds, erased countless species. Earth would be no different. Begin approach, he ordered. Standard formation. Weapons on standby. His second officer, a thin creature with silver skin, gestured at the sensors. Sir, I am detecting something around the third planet. Something. Veth did not bother to look. Be more specific. I cannot. The readings are strange. There appears to be debris in orbit, and there are energy signatures that do not match any known technology. Veth finally turned to the screen. He studied the readings for a moment, then laughed. Probably they're primitive satellites. Perhaps a few defensive platforms with weapons that cannot even scratch our paint. Ignore them. Continue approach. The fleet moved forward. Earth grew larger on the screens. The humans watching from their bunkers held their breath. General Duyon Beak sat perfectly still, his eyes on the tactical display. He waited. He had to wait until the enemy was close enough. One chance. That was all they would get. The Concorde ships crossed the orbit of the moon, 30 minutes from Earth. Still, they did not raise their shields. Still, they did not charge their weapons. Why would they? The sensors showed nothing threatening. Just a primitive planet full of primitive creatures waiting to die. Admiral, the second officer said again. The energy signatures are increasing. I think he never finished the sentence. The darkness of space exploded with light. From behind asteroids and hidden platforms, from bases on the moon and stations that had looked like debris, humanity's secret fleet emerged. 300 ships, smaller than the Concorde vessels, but fast and heavily armed. They fired without warning, without mercy, without hesitation. The first Concorde ship died before its crew even understood what was happening. A beam of blue fire cut through its hull like a knife through water. The reactor exploded, and the entire vessel became a ball of flame that burned for 3 seconds before the vacuum consumed it. Then the second ship died. And the third, and the fourth. Admiral Veth screamed orders into his communicator. Shields. Raise shields. All weapons return fire. But the shields took time to activate. The weapons needed time to charge. And the humans were not giving them time. The battle lasted 19 minutes. In those 19 minutes, 37 Concorde warships were destroyed. Thousands of aliens died, their bodies frozen in the cold of space. Their last thoughts, ones of confusion and terror. 3 ships escaped. They turned and fled at maximum speed. Their captains abandoning formation, abandoning honor, abandoning everything except the desperate need to survive. On Earth, Doyonbeek watched the last enemy ship vanish from his sensors. Then he looked at the cost. 42 human ships destroyed. 8,000 soldiers dead. The orbital platforms were damaged. The moon base was burning. Debris rained down through the atmosphere like falling stars. But Earth survived. Humanity survived. For now, sir. Suman's voice was quiet. What do we do now? Doyon stood up. His legs were tired, but his mind was clear. Now we follow them. Now we make them pay. 6 weeks later, Admiral Yuna Song led the human fleet into Concorde space. She was 44 years old, mother of 2 daughters who are now living in underground shelters on Earth. Before the war, she'd written poetry about peace and beauty. Now she wrote orders for destruction. Her fleet had grown. After the Battle of Seoul, every shipyard on Earth worked day and night to build more vessels. Volunteers joined by the millions. Scientists who had hidden their knowledge for years finally revealed technologies that the public had never imagined. Weapons that could punch through any armor, engines that could cross star systems in hours, shields that could withstand anything the Concorde could throw at them. The first target was Station Velis, the same place where Captain Taiho had died. The Concorde defenders fought bravely, but bravely was not enough. Their weapons could not penetrate human shields. Their ships could not match human speed. Within 1 hour, the station's defenses were shattered. Admiral Yuna docked her flagship at Bay 17, the same bay where the Horizon's Edge had docked months before. She walked through the same hallways, past the same guards who now lay dead or surrendered, until she reached the Grand Chamber. High Arbiter Thul was waiting for her. He sat on his throne of light, but the light was dim now, flickering like a candle in the wind. He looked older than before, weaker, afraid. Admiral Song, he said, you have proven your strength. Perhaps we can negotiate. Yuna walked closer until she stood directly below his throne. You killed my captain. You tried to kill my world. You called us pests and laughed while we burned. She looked up at him with eyes that held no mercy. There is nothing to negotiate. You made your choice. Now you will live with the consequences. Thul tried to stand, but guards grabbed him. Human guards. They dragged him from his throne and forced him to his knees. You cannot do this, he whispered. We are the Concorde. We have ruled for 40,000 years. Your rule is over. Yuna turned to her officers. Broadcast this across the galaxy. Let every species see. The humans are not victims. The humans are not prey. The humans remember and the humans repay. Over the following months, the war spread across Concord space. Human fleets struck at military bases and weapons factories, at shipyards and communication centers. They did not invade planets. They did not enslave populations. They simply destroyed everything the Concord needed to wage war. And everywhere they went, they broadcast the same message. You killed our people. We are taking payment. The 17 elder species, rulers of the galaxy for 40,000 years, suddenly understood fear. Their fleets were shattered. Their stations were burning. Their leaders were captured or dead. Nothing they did could stop the human advance. Some species tried to surrender. The humans accepted, but they did not forgive. The surrendered worlds were left alone, but they were watched. Any sign of military rebuilding was punished immediately and severely. Other species tried to fight. They gathered their remaining ships, formed desperate alliances, launched surprise attacks. But the humans were always ready. The humans always won. Back on Earth, the celebrations were mixed with grief. 3 billion people had died in a Concord counterattack that broke through the defenses for one terrible hour. Cities were gone. Families were shattered. Children grew up without parents, and parents grew old without children. But humanity did not break. They mourned their dead, and then they continued fighting. Not for conquest. Not for glory. For vengeance. Pure and simple, the galaxy would never forget what happened when they touched humanity. They would never forget the price they paid, and they would never, ever make the same mistake again. 3 years after Captain Taiho Park's execution, the war ended. Not with a great battle or a dramatic surrender, but with silence. The Concord had nothing left to fight with. Their fleets were ghosts. Their stations were ruins. Their power, built over 40,000 years, had crumbled in less than 3 years. Ambassador Narration was freed from her prison. Cell, on the first day of the human invasion of Station Velis, she had been there for months, alone in the dark, surviving on scraps and memories. When the door opened and human soldiers stood in the light, she thought she was dreaming. Ambassador Quan? The soldier's voice was young and worried. Can you walk? Nari tried to stand. Her legs were weak, her body thin from hunger. But she managed. She walked out of that cell on her own 2 feet, and she did not look back. They took her home to Earth. She spent months recovering. Eating real food, sleeping in a real bed, remembering what it felt like to be human. Doctors checked her body. Therapists helped her mind. And slowly, day by day, she began to heal. But she never forgot. She never stopped seeing Taiho's face in her dreams. She never stopped hearing his last words. You do not understand what you have done. Now, 3 years later, she understood. Everyone understood the new grand chamber on Station Velis was smaller than the old one. The floating chairs were gone, replaced by simple seats arranged in a circle. The throne of light was destroyed, and in its place was an empty platform where anyone could stand and speak. This was not the same Concord. This was something new, something broken and trying to rebuild. Nari was not the ambassador for this meeting. That role belonged to someone else, someone younger, someone who represented the future rather than the past. Her name was Hannah Shin. She was 23 years old, born just 1 year before the Horizon's Edge departed for its doomed mission. She had grown up during the war, watched her parents fight, watched her city burn in the Concord counterattack, watched humanity claw its way from victim to victor. Now she stood in the center of the new Grand Chamber, facing the representatives of 17 species who had once ruled the galaxy. Some of them would not meet her eyes. Others stared with hatred, barely hidden behind diplomatic masks. A few, the youngest ones, looked at her with something that might have been respect. The new High Arbiter was named Ren. He was older than Thule had been, but his eyes were tired rather than cold. He had opposed the war from the beginning, argued against the execution of Taiho Park, warned that humanity was more dangerous than they seemed. No one had listened. Now he was the leader of what remained. Ambassador Shin, he said. His voice was soft, careful. You have asked for this meeting? we have agreed to listen. What do you want? Hannah took a deep breath. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt heavy on her tongue. 3 years ago, she began, humanity came to you with open hands. We carried gifts. We shared our history. We asked for nothing except friendship and peace. As she paused, the chamber was silent. You refused. You called us pests. You executed our captain. You sent a fleet to destroy our world. You did this not because we threatened you, but because you were afraid of what we might become. Ren lowered his head. We were wrong. Yes, you were wrong. And 3 billion of my people died because of your mistake. 3 billion. Mothers, fathers, children. Entire cities erased. Because you could not imagine a galaxy where humans were allowed to exist. She stepped forward. Her voice grew stronger. We could have destroyed you. We could have burned every world, shattered every station, ended every species that stood with the Concord. Our generals argued for it. Our people demanded it. After what you did to us, no one would have blamed us. The representatives shifted in their seats. Fear flickered across their faces. But we chose differently. We chose to stop. Not because we forgive you. We do not forgive. We will never forgive. We chose to stop because we refused to become what you were. Hannah looked at each face in turn. You ruled through fear. You destroyed anything that threatened your power. You called this order, but it was not order. It was control. And control built on fear always fails, eventually. She took another breath. Humanity will not rule the galaxy. We do not want your power. We do not want your systems or your trade routes or your ancient privileges. What we want is simple. We want to live. We want to grow. We want to explore the stars without fear of extermination. Ren spoke carefully. And if we grant this, then we coexist. Your species rebuild. Trade continues. The galaxy moves forward. We will watch and we will remember, but we will not attack unless attacked. And if someone attacks you, if some species angry at their losses seeks revenge, Hannah's eyes hardened. Then we finish what we started. We did not destroy the Concord because we showed mercy. If that mercy is rejected, if any species threatens humanity again, there will be no negotiation, no warning, no second chance. She let the words hang in the air. We came to you with gifts, and you killed us. We fought back, and we won. This is your one opportunity to accept peace. There will not be another. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Ren stood up slowly. The Concord accepts your terms. We have no choice. But I want you to know something, Ambassador Shin. He walked toward her, stopping just a few feet away. Not all of us agreed with Thal. Not all of us wanted war. Some of us saw your species and felt hope, not fear. We were overruled. We were silenced. But we existed. He extended his hand in a gesture that was surprisingly human. Perhaps in time, we can find something better than coexistence. Perhaps we can find true partnership. Hannah looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it. Perhaps, but that time is not today. Today, we end a war. Tomorrow, we begin to heal. What comes after that depends on you. She released his hand and turned to leave. Remember Captain Taiho Park? Remember what he said? Remember that you created your own enemy. And remember that humans never forget. She walked out of the grand chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind her, the representatives of 17 species watched her go. Not one of them said a word. In the years that followed, a new proverb spread across the galaxy. It was whispered in markets and shouted in councils. Written into the histories of every world and taught to children of 100 species. Do not touch humanity. Do not threaten humanity. Do not provoke humanity, because they remember and they repay. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting an ordinary yellow star, humanity continued to live. They built new cities. They raised new children. They explored the stars with ships that carried weapons and gifts in equal measure, and in a quiet memorial garden in Seoul, statue of Captain Tai-Ho Park stood facing the sky. His eyes looked upward at the stars, and his lips were curved in a small, knowing smile. He had been right. The Concorde never understood what they did, but the galaxy understood now, and they would never forget.